Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind, our 91st episode. We are back after 2 weeks to discuss a television show, but before that, Niles, how have you been the last 2 weeks?
Fantastic. You know, it's been a good start or middle of the summer. I love it. It's been good lately. Had a nice little party in the park with friends, and I'm officially in the last year of my 20s, which is fun.
Right.
Can't remember if I mentioned that last episode or not, but that happened. If I did, I'm mentioning it again. But how are you, Dylan?
Yeah, pretty good as well. Just staying busy. Got a lot of exciting things for work coming up. As of today, day of recording, the current president has dropped out of the next presidential race, which is huge.
Historic.
Historic, and about damn time, man. Like, holy shit. But
Yeah. Well, I was getting to this point where it was like, you're not going to sway everyone's minds back to your camp. You're losing public opinion.
Well, like, you can't function. But it was very strategically smart. They waited until after the Republican National Convention was done, so the Republicans couldn't tailor any of their talking points to whoever the new candidate is. So politically, not bad.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah, other than that, doing pretty well. But and before we start into our topic, housekeeping. We normally do every 2 weeks. The next couple of weeks are going to be a bit different. We have The Boys that we're about to talk about. Oh, spoiler alert. But next week we will be back for Deadpool and Wolverine, and the week after that we're going to circle back, talk about The Acolyte. So we will have 3 weeks in a row of content for you guys, so get excited for that. But without further ado, we are here to talk about The Boys, Season 4. Picking up from where Season 3 left off, this season sees The Boys now led by MM, and with Annie officially on the team, trying to take down Vice President-elect Victoria Newman, Homelander, and Vought, all while Butcher is suffering from the side effects of last season's overuse of the Temp V formula. And it has also been announced that Season 4 it was the penultimate season of the show, so Season 5 will be the end. Niles, what are your initial non-spoiler thoughts on The Boys Season 4?
Man, oh man, am I satisfied with this season? I think it's maintained the quality that we've come to expect from the show. I think you and I were both, if we did an episode on Season 3 a long time ago, it feels like at this point, but we've done that. So if you've watched the show consistently, I encourage you to go check that one out. But I feel like you and I both are in agreement that this show every season is pretty high quality. You know, it's unapologetically satirical. It's so grounded in realism and cynicism of just like reality, and I think Season 4 was no exception to that expectation. I think it maintains that quality, it maintains that expectation, and I feel like this season, Season 4 here, is even more cynical in a way. It's always been on the nose with its commentary, and this season it's much more focused on the political side of things this time. It's very on the nose. It's very upfront and in the focus here. And I really love that.
Yeah. I agree. I thought this season was at times a little bit disjointed, but overall I liked it quite a bit. I've seen a lot of people say that this is a step down from previous seasons, and I just don't really agree. I think we got a lot of really great character growth this time. Especially for Huey, Butcher, and Homelander. And I also thought that the show manages to integrate elements of Gen V into it in ways that are just impactful enough while not being confusing for people who skipped out on that show.
Yeah.
And let's see what else we got.
Well, yeah, just kind of building off of that, I feel like this season in particular, since it's so political, and it's really kind of upfront and center here, I think it's very emblematic of the current state of political affairs in the U.S. So I think it's come at a very good time in a way. You know, we just talked about Biden and the RNC this year, and I think this season it's really couldn't have come at a better time, because I think each episode of this season there's this growing sense of urgency. Like, she's vice president elect. It's like, it's so close. The inauguration's almost here. We got to do something about this. And it's like, it's this nonstop march to political chaos, and so every episode it just feels like it continues to build and build, and I feel like a lot of us are feeling that right now, and just with the state of political affairs in the U.S. And it's just insane to me that there's still people, fans of the show, who had no idea for the longest time that Homelander is Trump. They got all mad this season that the show went woke. It's like,
I know.
What show were you watching for the past 4 years?
I know, because the show, it's great satire, but it is not subtle satire, and it never has been subtle satire. And I don't know if in the first season Homelander was as directly a Trump analog as he became in seasons 2 and 3, and especially this season. But that's been there for a long time, guys.
Yeah.
And, remember season 2 had Stormfront weaponizing social media and memes to radicalize people, and how she was, just trying to play at being a normal person who was kind of right-wing, but secretly she was literally a Nazi, from the Third Reich type Nazi.
Exactly.
And it's did you not pick up on that? Did you not understand that it's people who are just masquerading as just reasonable conservatives are usually just Nazis? Did that not register to you? It's like that meme. You know the meme with the astronauts, wait, the boys is woke, and the guy behind the guy's always has been.
Always has been, seriously.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling that people have not been paying that close attention to the plot. If at this point you're surprised at who the real villain of the show is and what they're saying about Homelander and Trump and the far right, and also, just both sides of the political spectrum.
And corporations.
Corporations, too. It's it's very on the nose. It has been the whole time. It's come on, guys.
Yeah. It's very much always been about how the military-industrial complex and the private sector of these corporations and the government work together, and how the system is corrupt and rotten to the core, and how they weaponize the entertainment industry to pacify the masses. It's come on, guys. But it has been very funny watching right-wingers finally catch up and be wait, this is about me. No.
Yeah.
On a less funny real world note, though, I do want to address the way people in the fan base have been treating actress Erin Moriarty, who plays January and Starlight in this over the last several months. It's been really fucking nasty. Just taking pot shots at her appearance and her face, and it's maybe she got some work done. Maybe she didn't. But you know what is true also? It's not my fucking business, and I don't care. And
seriously,
don't bully people for their appearance. And they bullied her early on in the show too, saying she wasn't pretty enough and stuff like that, which is fucked up and stupid.
It's disgusting. It's gross.
It's really nasty behavior and very pathetic.
Yeah. That's someone else's business. That is their life. They can do what they want with it. Who cares if they look different than how they did the first season, or if they did it all or did not? It's it's not my business, and I don't get a say in it, and it shouldn't be the focus of my attention in this show.
Exactly, and it's really not. But one last thing I'll say in non-spoilers is just the plot. I have a video on my channel talking about how the show shouldn't kill Homelander and what they should do with him in seasons 4 and 5. And I will say this season took the story in a lot of directions that I really did not expect, and I thought were pretty satisfying for the most part. And it sets us up for a really great final season. And the political satire, while maybe a little bit more direct, remains as on point and unsubtle as it's ever been, and that's very enjoyable for me. I don't know. So
agreed.
Yeah.
I would say so too. It's very rich in that social political commentary. It's very on the nose. It's very funny at times, and it's very grim and dark and bleak at other times, but it's also so packed with all these kinds of small jokes, spoofs, references, and they're also clever. They're so quick, so they're so powerful. The writers of this show, they deserve the credit. They did a really awesome job with this.
Yeah, I think it's if you like The Boys, you'll like this season, and if you're into what this show is already. But you want to jump into spoilers a little bit now?
Yeah, let's jump on in and let's talk a little
Cool.
bit more about this season. Let's start off talking about some new characters who got
Mm-hmm.
introduced this season. We got a new cast of characters. I feel like every season they sprinkle in a handful of new characters who,
Yeah.
have a big presence in the
You got to
show. And
replace the members of the Seven who die every season.
exactly. The ones who are
So,
kicked off who die, yeah, exactly.
yeah. So the first of those would be Firecracker, who is a sort of right-wing nutjob conspiracy theorist podcaster lady who goes to conspiracy cons and all that. At least partially inspired by real-life idiot and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh yeah.
And maybe with a bit of Alex Jones and Joe Rogan sprinkled in there for good measure, and alongside QAnon as you added in, yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, she's kind of this amalgamation of all these real life people who are just right wingers, conspiracy theorists, pieces of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and she leads this whole conspiracy because, like, Starlight or Annie is trying to do the Starlighter movement, and I forget exactly what their specific mission is because it's more from earlier in the season. But Firecracker and a bunch of others come up with this conspiracy theory that they are keeping like children in the Starlight house and that they're secret pedophiles, which is very clearly playing off of the Pizzagate conspiracy from back in 2015 or whenever that was. And like what happens a lot of times with these conservatives who accuse liberals and leftists of being pedophiles, Firecracker's a pedophile. That
Yeah.
seems to be a common thread for a lot of right-wing conspiracy theories.
Yeah, or just those kinds of people who are like so insecure with their own identities and like they have to subscribe to this this belief that everyone else is holding dear, you
Yeah.
know, and then it's like, but we'll keep the stuff that we do in that I really am interested in on the hush hush, like exactly what you're just saying there. And yeah,
It's like projection because, like, why are you so hyper-focused on other people doing this really horrifying thing? It's like, oh, because you're doing it, and you assume that if you're doing it, everybody else is too. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what ends up happening a lot, I think.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's a really weird phenomenon. But yeah,
Yeah.
you'll see that too with like some all kinds of different politicians, I would say. But yeah, the actor here, she did a fantastic job as Firecracker. And the writers did a great job too with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's just this really, really awful character.
She's so fucking horrifying.
who finds her way to like worm her way into like the Seven and Homelander's ear and stuff like that. It's ridiculous. But I really, while we're talking about her, I want to say that I really enjoyed the conspiracy theorist convention episode that she's really kind of introduced in. It's because it is so weird, but it feels oxymoronic in a way that all these conspiracy theorists would get together to talk about conspiracy theories, and it's like it's just weird that all this would happen. But
Yeah.
everything that goes on in that episode with like the body duplication character, I think his name's Splinter, like
Yeah. And he
he's
gave
such-
himself pink eye from eating his own ass.
it's such a that's such a disgusting visual, but
And I love the moment where they kill the prime one, and then all of them freak out because they know they're all about to die. Because I guess if that one dies, then it's game over for that guy.
they're just like, oh no, fuck, we're all screwed at this point.
yeah.
Yeah.
I will say part of that episode that I really loved was Frenchie and Kimiko when they're in the thing, and it's like, and Frenchie is like, yeah, if you get enough credibility behind something, you can get people to believe anything. Like that we landed on the moon. And then Kimiko just looks at him because she's fucking hammered.
Yeah,
she's
that's right. I forgot
and
about
she's
that
just
point.
she's just like, what? And then it's never mentioned again. It's like, it's just great, a little character detail. Frenchie doesn't believe in the moon landing. He thinks it's great.
Well, he strikes me as a guy who like, because he's so smart and all that stuff, but he does strike me as that person who's like, well, he does believe some out there conspiracy theories, just he doesn't talk about them very often.
He's a touch unhinged because the things he's most effective at are building explosives, and outside of that, he's just kind of like a merc.
yeah. Like I bet he's like a guy who probably believes that there were multiple shooters on like JFK's assassination and stuff. It's like, okay, all right, but yeah, I love that joke.
Yeah, but also just another thing about Firecracker and circling back to real world politics, it's like it speaks to how when a political figure is on someone's team, especially in the case for conservatives, how like the hypocrisy and the bad things they do that are like outside of the stated worldview of that group don't matter. Like
right.
when Firecracker is outed, like they're trying to attack Starlight for like hiding kids or harming kids, and then the truth comes out that Firecracker is a pedophile, and like you would think if any of these people had integrity, that would be like, oh, she's fully discredited now, but no. It's not, because it doesn't matter for them. She's on their team, and she uses it, and she's like, oh, Starlight had an abortion. It's like, don't think about the crimes I did. Think about this other thing. That's a very personal thing for this other human, but it, I can weaponize it, and just forget about what you just learned. That's way worse. Think about this instead, and just how effective that is as a political and rhetorical tool.
Right. It's kind of like a whataboutism in a way, and like deflecting on the other side. But also, I feel like she really, like, in that moment too, like, leaned into evangelicalism and just like the way that religion is weaponized and used to sway opinions, because he was just like, oh, I was at a Bible camp and like I'm asking for forgiveness in front of everybody on this televised stage, and it's like, okay, we have to forgive her because she just confessed, even though it wasn't
and it's
a
like,
real
I
confession.
sinned and God, I'm reborn in the eyes of God. It's like yeah,
it's like, it's gross. But yeah, her superpower, even though her superpower is kind of lame, it's just like she can make some sparks with her hands. Her real superpower, I think I saw this somewhere online, her real superpower is that she's like, it's the influence she wields over others, and the power, how she can manipulate the narrative and just like get to the point really quickly and just be like, I know how to talk to my base and I know how to rally them. And that's really scary.
Yeah. And speaking about being able to speak to people and manipulate people, I think we can talk about Sage. After this, the supposed smartest person in the world that Homelander recruits into the Seven to sort of create a coup. And
she's such a great addition. I love how she kept correcting everyone the whole season. Like they kept saying smartest woman, and she's like smartest person.
Yeah,
like, there's this layer of just like toxic masculinity in there of just like, or just sexism, just blatant sexism. It's not masculinity, sexism. Let's call it what it is. But yeah, she's a force to be reckoned with until she gets shot in the head. Then she's out for the count for a little bit, and then she's back to her former glory.
I really enjoyed that, how like she is completely useless in the meeting with all the politicians and like business people because she has been shot in the head and she's lobotomized essentially. And I love that I don't think Victoria Newman really understood specifically what was going on with her in that moment. And she's looking at her like, what the hell?
I was just talking to you like 10 minutes ago. You were totally fine. What happened?
You're way smarter.
But I mean, when she's at her, like, the peak of her performance, like, she's not lobotomized or anything. She's playing, like, 4D chess while everyone's still playing, like, Chutes and Ladders. Like, not even the same game. Like, I really enjoyed the addition of her this season because she just adds this other layer of complexity. Like, you always kind of think that the boys, they're finally a step ahead. Like, they're finally going to get there and, like, record this conversation and get the word out. And then it's like, oh, no, wait, it was actually a trap because she knew that you were there. Because, of course, you were there. Like, she's so ahead of you guys. I thought she just added a lot to this season, you know?
Yeah, and I'm curious, too, like, was she being honest the entire time with everything she said? Like, maybe she did want A-Train to leak all the information that he leaked to the boys. I don't know. Maybe, what do you think?
I think there are some moments where she was intentional with it, but I also think, like, she could have just been lying to cover her tracks. At the same time, Homelander knows when you're lying. So I think that she's aware of that fact too. So I don't know. She is pretty smart. I think that there are some things that I didn't entirely buy about how smart she was and how far ahead she was thinking. Like, I don't entirely buy the notion that she knew how to orchestrate all the events to the degree that she's claiming at the end there with Homelander, where she's like, "Here you go, happy, like we did it. I knew all this was going to kind of happen," but it's like there's so many things I don't think she could account for. Like, was she expecting Newman to go back on the plan and resign in office? Did she know that Newman was going to eventually be killed? Like, there was like a lot of what ifs in there. At the same time, I can accept the idea that she was unaware of all the minute details and she just knew what are the best moves to position her side or her, for like her argument to get her higher up and actually execute on the plan.
Right. Or it could have been a situation where she had accounted for the possibility that the assassin disguised as Starlight does kill the president, and also the possibility of something else happening where Newman gets killed, and she had contingencies for either of those, and then is just playing it off to Homelander like, oh, the way it happened was specifically the way I planned for it to happen. Whereas in reality, she was more just like she's smart enough to see the different possibilities and adaptive enough to embrace whatever hand she's dealt at any given time. You know, maybe that was kind of what it was.
I think you're right there that she probably just had contingencies for contingencies. Like she's probably is a master planner in that way. And you, like, we got drinks the other day, and you like said a quote to me that really stuck with me of like, when you write a smartest person in the world character, they're only going to be as smart as the writers of the show. And I think that's true. And yeah, you got to find some way to like write in a loophole that gives your character more of an excuse. And so I'm fine with how it played out. And I do still think that she is technically the smartest person in all of the boys.
I also liked how irritated she got with like the stupider people around her. Like when she and Homelander are interrogating that, like, I think one of the crime analytics people, and then she confesses partially to something, and then Homelander immediately lasers her brain and Sage is like, do you think maybe the next words that were going to come out of her mouth might have been useful to us in any way? And he's like, she just confessed. It's like, and she probably knew more stuff that we could use.
Yeah, like, why did you kill her?
And then when they announce her as part of the Seven and give her the costume and everything, she's like, hey, man, it's a lot harder to orchestrate a coup when everybody knows my fucking face.
Yeah. Like, did you think about why you... Yeah, like, she's very funny, and like the way she talks to Ashley sometimes, like when she was at the party, she's like, didn't you get the memo that you're not invited to the big kids table? Like, you know? She was great. And I also really I enjoyed the sick relationship between her and the Deep, where it's just kind of like her version of getting high and relaxing and cutting back at the end of a long day is like intentionally dumbing herself down, having sex with a douchebag, and watching these terrible movies or just reality star content. Like, I thought that was just so funny. Like when he first comes over, she's already kind of lobotomized herself. She's like, you want to watch Transformers 2, the one with the racist robots?
And I also love at the end of the season how like you kind of realize, oh, she's sleeping with Black Noir as well. She likes to sleep with both of them, but she only likes to sleep with the Deep after she's lobotomized herself.
Yeah. That was a great detail.
Yeah. And speaking of that, like, I guess let's transition to Black Noir 2.
The second,
funny,
yes.
Funny note on him. He's the same actor who's been playing Noir the whole time. They're just working it in where he is now like an actor soup playing the role of Black Noir because Homelander killed the last one. Also, he's narcoleptic in real life, and they worked that into the story and made it a character trait for him. It was so funny in the fight in the Flatiron Building when he falls asleep and Butcher is just like, what the fuck?
It's like, this is so weird. Yeah, Noir is I'm so glad that they kept him around. because his character, like the original Noir in season 3, when we got all this extra context around his character, we learned more about him. He was such a heartbreaking character. He was a
Yes.
tragic character in season 3. Before then,
Mm-hmm.
he had been like just kind of this like robot automaton killing machine, like with no
Yeah.
emotion, no context. And last season, we finally got all this emotional context for him. So it's really sad when he died. At the same time, he's a murderer, mass
Yeah.
murderer, so fuck him. But the Black Noir 2 this season is such a dynamic shift in his character, because going from like this stoic, silent character with obvious mental illness, we have this very vocal character who's like this unexpected source of comedic relief this season.
Yeah.
He's so funny. Whenever he opens his mouth, he's just like, "Shut the fuck up, Noir."
Yeah, it's like, was it A-Train says, he's like, dude, you don't talk. Like, it's your only thing.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm so glad they kept him around. In some ways, he's kind of this upgrade of the old Noir, because he's like literally an upgrade, because he can fly and he can talk to others. But it's also just interesting to see this relationship, like kind of this bromance start to develop between bro.
They're
This
so
bromance
fucking
develops
stupid
between them.
together.
Yeah, they're both just like fools, just straight up fools. But you see this deep kind of start to corrupt him in a way and turn Noir back into the old Noir in a way. Like, he was on board with like killing those guys in the first episode and turning them into martyrs. Like,
Yep.
he just kind of was on board with that, but he was like, that was so fucked up, you guys. but like at the end of the season, he's like, oh, murder boner.
Yeah. Well, and I thought that was a great like bit too, because the second Ashley has been a character since main Ashley like got into a position of power, right? And it's just been like a running gag that they're like, "Shut up, Ashley. Sorry, Ashley," for multiple seasons, and then it pays off in a way. It's like, "Oh, I got Ashley right here." It's like, dude, that's the wrong one.
And she wasn't on the list, man.
She wasn't on the list. Yeah, I love the contrast between old Noir and new Noir as well. This guy is just a goofy guy who's obsessed with like getting into the mind of the character, and he can't figure it out because he's like, his room is a dojo, but he doesn't know karate.
Like, he just wears all black. Everything in his apartment is black. I can't get a read on him. Like, who's this guy? He's so funny.
He finds the drawings of the little cartoon characters that we saw in the last season too. He mentions that he's like, I just found these drawings of like children's characters. Why the fuck does he have these? And I'm like, I don't know. That's fucking weird.
I don't know. We can't ask him, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see like the bromance, how that changes in season 5. Like if there'll be tension over their relations with Sage. Like if like Deep in him will start to kind of like hate each other, or if they'll just continue to be bros and just continue to murder
dumbass
people.
bros.
Yeah, dumbass murder bros.
Yeah, taking a break for a minute, just like one element in character arc that I liked it, but one of the elements I didn't like of the season overall was just how separate Butcher's storyline was from the rest of the boys, for the most part. Like, he intersects with them at several times, but he is on his own quite a lot, and I enjoyed the material itself. The Shoulder Devil and Angel with Kessler and Becca was really engaging, but there just wasn't as much of him playing off of the rest of the boys this time around, and I think we did miss something with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. It is kind of hard when he's off on his own adventure the entire season, and he just he just shows up when they need him, or really don't need him. He just kind of there.
Or would have been better off without him in a very specific moment.
Exactly. Yeah, at the last case when he comes in, but Butcher, he's always had this element of being like an agent of chaos in a way. Like, I think when Ryan got introduced into the series, he kind of dialed that down a little bit, because he wanted to like try and, especially in the third season, I think he was more being like, we need to protect Ryan and get him over on our side, and also in this season too. But I think in this season, him just being on his own and just having this shoulder devil shouting at him the whole time, I think that made him return a little bit more to that role as a chaotic agent in the story.
Yes. I agree, and I didn't again like I liked all the material itself, and I guess in the older seasons, like Butcher would just kind of like go off on his own for a while too, but we didn't see as much of what he was doing. We normally see him come back, and they'd be like, "Where the fuck were you?" And he's like, "Ah, just you wait."
He's
But
like, "Oh, I got the answer to your prayers here. Oi." That's my Butcher impression. It's terrible.
Oi.
Oi, cunt.
Don't be a cunt. Yeah, but I do think Butcher's arc this time around is actually one of the more tragic storylines in this season because to me, it seemed like he was really genuinely like facing his mortality and doing like putting in a lot of effort to go against his worst instincts, personified by Kessler this time around. And it just does not pan out the way he wants to, and he succumbs. And I really did enjoy seeing that Becca and Kessler angle on him. I liked seeing Chantal Van Santen back as Becca, and I thought she was great in the season. One thing I did find interesting, too, is as soon as Butcher realizes that Kessler is a hallucination, we don't see Becca again. She's gone.
Yeah, she just vanishes.
She vanishes, and I did see a theory early on that Kessler was in Butcher's mind because he was only interacting with Butcher, and I really liked that theory, and I was like, oh, this does kind of check out. And then I remember in when they capture Victoria Newman's boyfriend, the chemist guy, and Kessler like kind of slaps him awake, and then in the next shot, Kessler's on the other end of the room and Butcher's right by him. And I was like, oh, yep, that's exactly what's going on. I love that. I thought that was a great slow reveal of it there.
It really was, and I didn't see that coming. So they did a fantastic job with the writing of this season there, because I really liked the dynamic between him and Kessler as it developed. But the reveal, I did not see that coming until he like directly spoke to Becca. And that was so great. They did such a good job. It was like Fight Club level reveal, where all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, Tyler Durden's the same character? What the hell? Like, it's so great.
I also loved that it's not how those type of scenes normally play out where Butcher is just imagining the interaction entirely. Like, he is speaking and looking in a direction, and other people can see him doing that. It's just there's no one there. It makes it even more unhinged. And it makes me so sad because in the finale, like, when Ryan comes to see Butcher in the hospital bed, it's like Butcher is playing it correctly. He's doing the right thing, and he's thinking of the kid first. I think he genuinely is, and I actually believed him when he's like, look, if you can honestly tell me you feel safer at Vought Tower, I will not stop you. I think he's trying to be like a good dad in that moment. And Mallory, understandably, like, she has this sense of urgency and she fucks it up. Like, she dumps all of this traumatic information on Ryan, who's like 13 or something, at the same time. Like I get it, Grace. I understand why you feel that he needs to have this, but like, you can't do that. He's not equipped to handle all of that information at one time in this specific context. What are you doing? And she gets killed. That was something I genuinely didn't see coming. I did not expect us to lose Mallory this time around.
Yeah, we really lost a lot of allies here for them, for the boys, and that scene, I agree, 100% with that read. I think that Butcher has always been trying to approach Ryan on his level and develop a bond and a relationship and win him over to their side of things through just emotional connection. Because I think if you approach that kind of situation too quickly, too aggressively, it's not going to go in your favor. But I think when that moment happens where Ryan kills Mallory, I think there is kind of this switch that flips in Butcher's head, and he sees Mallory's body. He's like, okay, I need to go now and start this, because Ryan's not ready. He's not going to be ready, and we're not going to be able to convince him for a while now. And I think it's fitting that Butcher kind of turns into a soup in this season as well. We get this dramatic reveal in the final episode of him just like killing Newman, tearing her in half,
Oh
basically.
God, Butcher.
Which is so brutal. Like, they had like such a great plan lined up of like, she's just going to resign. It's going to be fine. There's going to be peaceful transition of power and all this good stuff. And then Butcher just comes in and fucks it up at the last moment because he's like, "Oi, no deals."
No deals. Yeah, it's like you see him turn up and you just know right away. It's like, dude, no.
Oh,
like,
oh no.
Oh my God, no, come on.
Butcher, no, we're so close. But it's fitting that he's made this transition into a soup at this point, because when we first meet him, in the series, it's an all-out war in his mind against the soups. He's like, these are terrible people. Homelander's the worst of them, and we need to take them down by any means necessary. And I think at a certain point, after trying for so long, when he did take the V, subconsciously or consciously, there is this realization that's like, nothing we're doing is working. We need to fight them on their level, become a soup ourselves. We need to become what we hate the most. And I think that's kind of what Butcher did, whether he, was very conscious of that or not, or if he was just like, I need to survive so that way I can win.
Well, and what makes it, I think, even more compelling too is like Huey's plan probably would have worked and would have prevented the calamity that is coming, right? Like, they probably had a better shot with Newman on their side. And Butcher, by being himself and succumbing to his worst instincts and, like, fighting fire with fire, fucked everything up. And now Homelander is essentially the president.
Yeah.
And the soups are deputized to, like, hunt down anyone who opposes Homelander and his agenda. And it's like, dude, you fucked it.
You were this close.
It's like you absolutely fucked it. But I think that's a good point to transition into Homelander himself. Goddamn, Anthony Starr is so good as this character. Oh my God.
He's so great in this role. He's so intimidating. He makes this character feel unpredictable and maniacal, genocidal, crazy. But he also, like, the character himself, he feels stuck in this like perpetual state of just like, I don't know what to do. He doesn't know how to develop or grow. He's just like, I think he's always going to be this scared little boy who wants love and attention, whether he says so or not. Like, if he's like, I don't need that anymore, it's like, you still do, very much so. But yeah, Anthony Starr, wow, what a fantastic performance again by this guy.
I also love the parts where he's like, and I think he is very like Trump in this way too, where he's like, he very clearly is not thinking about the logistics of what he's trying to do at all.
Yes.
Like, when they're in the meeting with all those important people talking about the plan, he and Newman and Sage, and they start asking him these questions about, like, who's going to do this and this and this, and he's like, fuck. It's like he obviously doesn't have any interest in the actual logistics of governing or running a company or doing any of the stuff that would be expected of him. And then in the finale, the way he delivers that line, I think it's Newman who asks him something. It's like, you thought about this, right? You're going to have to arrest half the country and all this stuff. And he's like, of course I thought about that. Why wouldn't I think about that? He just walks away, and it's like, yo, you never thought about it, did you?
Yeah, right.
But he has to save face. He's such a funny character, as awful as he is.
Seriously.
He's such a dipshit in incredibly important ways, and is not capable of doing the stuff he wants to do without the smarter people around him.
I know. Because he acknowledges it too, where he's like, I've climbed to the top of this company, and I basically run Vought now. It's my company, but I still feel so empty, and I don't know what to do about it. And it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't be running Vought then. Maybe you should, like, reflect inwardly or something, or find something else
Is
to
it
do
last
with yourself.
season where he, like, is being presented with, like, shareholder numbers and stuff like that, and he just doesn't want to hear anything, and it's like, oh, you poison chalice isn't the right word, but it's like, be careful what you wish for, because now you have to do the boring shit too. And
yeah, I do remember that. That was a pretty brutal moment for him, I think. And this season, I feel like we have, like, I think Homelander has experienced some growth this season, but I think it's more fake growth, or it's superficial growth. And let me explain what I mean by that, because he does acknowledge at a certain point that he's placed unrealistic expectations on Ryan after he goes home to the lab where he grew up. He kind of goes there, he reconnects with and murders the people who raised him and tortured him
Yes.
when he was growing up and turned him into the person he is today. But then, like, he comes back, like, literally the next episode after after that, like, and he tells Ryan, you know, I'm proud of you for standing up and speaking up and saying, yeah, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this show. This show seems kind of stupid. And it's like, yeah, I'm glad that you made that decision. Literally the next episode after that, when Ryan tells him he doesn't want to do the Bot Street bullshit, like the Sesame Street ripoff, he just, like, brushes him off. He's like, I'm too busy for this. Just fucking do it. And it's like, to me, that's like, if you really cared about your son and all this stuff and wanted to follow through on that commitment to not place these expectations on him, and to tell him to stand up for himself, then you would say, okay, yeah, don't do the show. But to me, that just kind of further cemented Homelander as a psychopath and showed me that he really hasn't changed as a person. He's still kind of the same insecure, scared little boy, like I said. But that said, I am glad that we got to spend that time in the lab and learn a little bit more about his upbringing, because I think it does add a lot to our understanding of him. And, you know, the actual context in the show has been a little vague about, like, what they did to him growing up. We just knew he grew up in a lab.
Yeah.
In the Diabolical kind of animated series, they add a little bit more context to that, but it's also a little bit more superficial. But this, I'm glad that we got this episode of going back there and kind of rounding him out. It kind of, The Boys does this great job, I think, time and time again, of making the audience sympathize with and empathize with certain characters over the years, like especially these bad characters like the Deep, A-Train, Black Noir. Like, I think all these characters, we do get a little bit more context about them, and then we're kind of like, okay, I empathize with your situation and what you're experiencing and kind of this emotional heartache that you got, and it highlights these complex layers of characters, making you understand why they are the way they are in certain instances. But to be clear, Homelander's upbringing and the torture he endured, it is not a justification for his actions or the person he is today. He's a terrible, shitty person, and he should not be idolized at all.
Right? No, of course not. But I think this is a great difference between him and the Deep. Like, the Deep, the first thing we see him do is sexually assault Starlight, and then the show makes you think they're going to try to do a redemption arc for him, and they don't, thankfully. And instead, they just make him more and more and more pathetic. As every season goes on, he gets more pathetic and becomes more of a loser. And I think that's because he's got nothing going on in his brain. He's just a dipshit, like a stupid fucker. But Homelander is a more complicated person, and what I find so compelling about him as a character is that he is this fully detestable villain, but there is also a level of understanding you have with him because he is a lifelong victim of abuse. And like you said, that doesn't justify anything, but it speaks to cycles of abuse, how someone who is abused can then grow up and go on to do that to other people. And he does. But you can really, that episode where he goes back to the lab where he was raised, you can really, Anthony Starr does such a great job here because you can see his pain in this episode, and he just genuinely seems hurt and confused by, like, how they could do that to a child. And because remember at one point he's like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do this to me? Like, why would you think, and like, you lit me on fire in this thing, and you know, it couldn't kill me, but it still really fucking hurt.
Yeah.
Like, and I love that element of his character because he's just confused. And then at the end, when the one guy's like, I'm sorry, he's like, why are you sorry? You were just following your orders. You were just doing your job. Why are you sorry now? Because you're about to die? And it's like, yeah, that's, you know, kind of feel for you in this moment. But also, he's a rapist and a fascist and really terrifying and kills loads and loads of people for no reason at all. But I also really like watching his scenes with Ryan because it seems like he genuinely is trying to be a decent father, but he's such a fucked up human being that he's incapable of doing so. Like, he is putting in effort. He's doing the surface level things. He's getting, like, milkshakes with him. He's walking around. He's trying to, like, coach him a little bit, but it's like, you don't understand what it's like to be a human being. You understand what it is like to be a product for this company, and to do like he's basically like being a dad based on like commercials, you know, like based on watching commercial advertisements that feature dads. Like that's kind of his approach to doing it, which is very interesting.
I mean, yeah, you're so right that it's superficial in that way, because like once he finds that photo that Butcher sent Ryan of like Becca and Butcher and the dog together, he just like he throws a tantrum and just lasers the room to shit basically. And it's like any other kind of normal father like would like ideally an ideal father would like kind of sit down with the son and have a realistic conversation about like, well, you know, let's talk about this photo maybe, and like you might even just like tell me a little bit more about why this photo resonates with you. Do you want to keep it? Like, let's talk more about our family and like what we can do to like make it more like the family that you want, Ryan. Like let's you know, let's have an open conversation about this, or just you don't even need to have a conversation. You could just accept it and move on and just be like, yeah, that's just his old family, and now he's with me, and it's okay for him to have that kind of memory and that emotional attachment to it. But Homelander just is incapable of having that conversation and being mature about it. He's just like, no, I have to be the only family for Ryan. I am the family.
Well, and it speaks to a difference between Homelander and Butcher, because remember earlier in the season when Butcher and Kessler, who was also Butcher, were gonna bake the cookies and put the like thing in them to drug Ryan and like capture him to train him and stuff like that, and then Butcher just is like actually being a father this season in a lot of moments, and he is like, and it goes back to like it's so sad because he is putting in the effort and he's actually doing a pretty decent job by Billy Butcher standards, at least. You know?
He is. He really is, and he acknowledges like, yeah, I can't give him these cookies. I need to throw them out. You know, that is not the way to go about this. Yeah, exactly. Fucked him up. Let's have another game of pool or foosball, whatever we were playing.
Yeah. And then another character arc that I thought was great this season, though, is the culmination of A-Train's redemption arc. I thought it was really satisfying. They've done a great job of slowly building this up over the last few seasons. Like, he's done an increasing number of good deeds, and always like played it off selfishly, but he's been doing it, and then sort of pushes him over the edge into doing the right thing, which I thought was great. Like that scene where he drops off at the hospital and the kid notices him and he feels heroic, like genuinely for the first time in his life. Also really loved the scene of Huey forgiving him. I thought that was a great character moment for both A-Train and Huey. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think A-Train's redemption arc has been very satisfying, especially when you consider everything that's happened in the previous seasons. Like, it has some really cool stuff this season, but like, you know, he got kicked off the Seven in the previous season. He had to join this culty church to get back in. He tried to do some good shit for his brother, with the whole situation with Blue Hawk, and he eventually like tries to get revenge for his brother on Blue Hawk by killing him. And yeah, it's not like he goes from like 0 to 100 immediately. It's like very gradual buildup of like he's recognizing these failures in his life, and I think this season definitely culminates very well. And you know, again, going back to like a comparison with the Deep, because I think they have these arcs, and we did expect the Deep to have this redemption arc, but it doesn't pan out that way, and he just gets he just becomes shittier and shittier and shittier as time goes on. Like after he exits the Seven, and they exit the Seven around a similar time, and they rejoin the Seven through similar avenues as well, kind of that church in a way. But while A-Train has grown and recognized his failures, the Deep has stagnated and become an even worse individual, kind of willfully ignorant of the fascism, the authoritarianism, and just like his terrible actions and behaviors. Yeah, A-Train's, I'm really happy with what's happened with him this season. And I also really enjoyed how him and Ashley kind of came these co-conspirators in a way this season too.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned A-Train's arc last season with his brother and Blue Hawk, because I think it's a great contrast to this season. Like last season, A-Train was very cynically trying to do the right thing, right? You remember the A-Train to Africa, and
Yeah.
he changes his costume, and he's like, he's very much doing all of that for himself. And in this season, he kind of makes that switch through MM's influence, I would say, and is doing the right things for the right reasons. And he's rewarded for that. He's seen as a hero for real for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I love the just that funny joke with like the obvious Blindside parody with him, like training A-Train with Will Ferrell, and it's like it's not his backstory at all, but it's so distasteful.
It's so funny. Like, I love how they're on the nose with it too. Will Ferrell's like, that wasn't too blindsidey, right? And they're like, no, it was perfect. It was perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I also liked Annie's story this season, her little arc. And she's also, all these characters have multi-season arcs here.
Yes.
But Annie, to me, she is kind of the one character who I feel like is an actual hero, or trying her best to be an actual superhero throughout the seasons. Because you can tell that she wants to do good and stand up for what's right. Like the Starlight houses, like those are, from what I remember, they're for like displaced youth and people who like need a home. It's not at all a pedophile ring. It's like, let's actually help children in need and get them what they need. And her arc this season, what happens to her character, it's heartbreaking for me, because I think when her entire political life, or her entire personal life, becomes this kind of source of political fodder for Firecracker and Homelander's camp, and because of her notoriety, when you have this level of fame and recognition, I mean, everyone should not be committing violent acts against one another to get their point across, but she, I think, is really expected to just sit there and do nothing while Firecracker is literally right across the street doing the 6-hour telethon, just spouting lies about her character, and then like sharing personal medical information about Annie as well on television. It's just that would just break me down as a person if that was happening to me. Yeah. And I was so happy to see her fuck up Firecracker in the moment, just beat the shit out of her on live TV. That was so great. Yeah. And the showmakers, they did such a great job of having the audience side with her character in this moment. But it completely fucks up her public image, and I just feel so bad for her throughout this season. There's just so much that happens.
You reminded me, too, of just, like, another real-world parallel to the politics that this is playing off of. Like, all of this, like, because the right will inflict verbal violence on people on the left, like, constantly, right? Talking about how, like, trans people are groomers. We should kill them before we kill our kids, blah, blah, blah. Like, demonizing every minority, every progressive person. But then as soon as someone on the left, like, pops back, they're like, oh, so much for the tolerant left. Look at this fucking freak. And it's like, what the fuck? What do you do? Like, how do you justify that in your own brain? And that's kind of what happens here, because they Sage weaponizes Starlight's retaliatory violence against Firecracker to spin a narrative. Whereas, like, well, no, this is just punching back. Punching back is allowed. If you're hit, you can hit back. That's okay. That's totally acceptable to do.
Right. Yeah.
And it just, but it's like a very real thing where, like, right wingers are calling for political violence and violence against the powerless literally every day. Libs of TikTok, Matt Walsh. Their rhetoric has gotten, like, bomb threats sent to children's hospitals. But then
gosh.
Yeah, well, no, because they say that, like, children's hospitals are doing, like, transgender surgeries or whatever. And it's like, no, not really. And even if they were, it doesn't really matter. But it's like, that rhetoric is never punished. But as soon as a left-wing person says something of similar, they're like, oh, we should, let's find this person's job, message their employer, blast them on the news. And it just becomes a whole media circus, right?
Exactly. It's heartbreaking, and it's very, her depiction, her story this season is very like we're saying here, reflective of reality in a lot of ways. And Annie's character, I feel like she's been grappling with identity issues for a while with,
Yeah.
Starlight as her pseudonym, but she's really Annie January, this very kind of down to earth small town
Mm-hmm.
girl. And so it's very psychological identity issues and then literal identity issues with the shapeshifter when that comes into play this season too. But
Mm-hmm.
she's also grappling with like depression this season, and I really felt for her. It was heartbreaking, and I felt for Huey too, which we'll get
Yeah.
to. But
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how, like, she wants to shed Starlight, right? She wants to just be Annie. Like, she throws her costume in the trash at the end of last season, and she's trying to just be a normal person. But I think you're right. She is dealing with identity issues because she's only able to do what she's doing with the Starlight House by naming it the Starlight House. And she, I think, is dealing with an issue where, like, a lot of famous people who want to make a difference have to lean on that famous persona in order to achieve their goals. And it's like, that's not really me. I wish I could make a difference in a more organic way, but it's like she has the power of this status and this brand, and I think she's kind of grappling with the need to use it when it's appropriate, and the season ends with her flying away with her superpowers to, like, she has to be a superhero now because that's the card she's been dealt, right?
yeah, she's actually got to use those powers.
Mm-hmm.
While we're on the topic of her too, I also want to say that I really liked the shapeshifter character this season too, even if it was a very minor role. But I really like that part of the plot. I thought it was very neat, and I appreciated the realism too. You compare it to like Mystique in like the X-Men, where it's just like, oh, it's instantaneous, it's easy. But then this shapeshifter, it's like, okay, no, I need to shed my skin literally.
And like recharge too.
Yeah, it's like it was very more like just felt grounded in realism. But I really also appreciated her monologue too when she's talking with this trapped Annie in this house, because she was talking about. She gave an example of primarily of her preschool teacher, the first one she could ever remember. She saw all of the preschool teacher's memories, like all the shitty things that her preschool teacher had done in her life. Like she cheated on her husband with her husband's best friend, and like some other like shitty shit that happened in her life. And the whole point of her monologue was just like everybody in some way finds a way to rationalize and justify their actions, and everyone views themselves as a good person and kind of just justifies their existence, even though, hey, I've committed these terrible crimes or done these shitty things to these people or to other people. We all find this way to still position ourselves in an appropriate framework for our own mental well-being and to continue on. And I think that's so true. I thought it was very reflective of everyone. And, she mocked Annie, and I think some of those like the way that she talked about Annie, it was fair. It was kind of justified in a way. It's like, oh, woe is me because of my mom and the things that I had to do in the pageant circuit, and everybody hates me and all this stuff, even though this was the life that I wanted. I wanted to be a superhero. I asked for this in a way. But, everyone, in a way, we do this in our own heads. There's shitty things or things that I regret in my life that I've done where I was like mean to other people or just not very nice. And still I find a way to like kind of press that shit down. And
you rationalize it and you move on because we're all the hero of our own story. Right. And I think the pageant circuit stuff was really interesting too, because like what she did to Firecracker and a lot of other people, as she says, was like, that's a genuinely fucked up and evil thing to do.
Yes.
And she recognizes that. And then I did love the part at Tech Knight's mansion where they run into each other. And she's like, hey, I am sorry for what I did to you. Like, that was cruel. And it was my choice to do that. And I am sorry. It doesn't justify anything you've done, but I am sorry for that pain I caused you. And I really liked that exchange for her. And then, of course, she stabs her in the neck with a thing because she's on a mission. But and I do think the monologue you're talking about, though, from the shapeshifter, it also really applies well to Vicky Newman, because when in that same sequence at Tech Knight's mansion where she's meeting with all the like billionaires and conservative politicians with Homelander, and remember the guy who is the Speaker of the House, I guess, is talking to her about like he's like mansplaining why abortion is bad to her, and she like imagines herself popping her own head, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure that's really aggravating, Vicky, because he's wrong and you're right. But again, you have chosen to align with these people. These are your chosen allies. You are no better than them at this point because you are one of them.
Yes.
And I do think Vicky's arc goes into an interesting place that is ultimately cut short by Butcher, but kind of a shame, too. She was a great character, and it would have been fun to see where she ends up going forward. But, you have one last note on Annie.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about her is that I really kind of wish she killed the Deep in the Flatiron Building during their fight. Like, she had it. She won with the help of others. She won. Like, they bested Noir and the Deep, and she kind of had this moment, but then they had to rush off because they were worried Noir was going to come back and more reinforcements, so I understand why they left. But after everything that happened between the Deep and Annie, I just really wanted her to finish the job. But more to come in season 5, I'm sure.
Right. I am glad that she got some payback on him finally, though. That's been a long time coming. And I hope ultimately she is the one to kill him. I think that would be fitting. And I think also in that scene, though, the reason she didn't isn't MM like, do you know how to kill him? Because I'm sure we can figure it out, but we don't really have time right now, so let's go.
I know. It would have just been like blunt force trauma, just trying to like break the shit out of his head or his neck. But yeah, exactly. Like the logistics of the scene, it was like, no, you gotta move. You gotta go. You gotta go.
Yeah. And sort of tying in between Huey and Annie, like obviously the shapeshifter is posing as Annie, and Trix like lives with Huey for over a week and like hooks up with him a ton. And I saw some people getting mad at Annie for being upset with Huey for sleeping with the doppelganger, which like that's unfair of her, but also it's kind of understandable from her perspective, you know? Like you can see how in the moment she would be really fucking angry about this, and she gets over kind of quickly, and it's like, we're fine, just like you have to get tested because gross. So I didn't appreciate. It's just another example, and we'll talk about this more in the Acolyte episode, I'm sure. But or a House of the Dragon episode, we're gonna talk about it a lot. But the audience not engaging fully with the material they're watching, like having their own preconceived notions about characters or relationships, and not actually ingesting the material and thinking about what they saw. Because it's like it's a very human moment for Annie, right? Like while she's been chained up in this like shithole for 10 days, her boyfriend has been fucking someone else who was just like wearing her face and behaving in like a different way to her. Like that's understandable to be upset about that, right? Like
yeah, I would be so pissed if that happened to my life. So yeah. But I mean, speaking of Andy and Huey, I mean, Huey was put through the ringer this season too. His main storyline, I think, this season, at least for the first 4-ish episodes, really centered around his father having a stroke, being in the hospital, and eventually, dying. But it gave him a chance to reconnect with his long lost mother.
Yep.
And the way that whole sequence pans out, because he wants to save his dad, so he goes and gets some V from A-Train, shoots up his dad.
Well, his mom shoots up his dad, remember? Because he decides not to.
Yeah, his mom does it. But then eventually Huey has to put his father down himself. He basically has to kill his own dad. That episode is so sad. Yeah. It's emotionally devastating there.
I think that episode is one of the best of the whole show. Like, one, you get the storyline with the rest of the boys, with Vicky Newman and Stan Edgar on the farm with the super sheep, which is
super cool.
Very fun and awesome action. And then at the same time, you have Hugh Sr., Simon Pegg's character, flipping the fuck out at these superpowers and accidentally phasing through people and killing them, with Huey ultimately having to put him down. And Simon Pegg has not had a ton of material in the show, obviously. He's just Huey's dad for the most part, and he's cast because Huey in the comic was drawn to look like Simon Pegg. But he's incredible in that episode. I think he really crushed it.
Oh yeah, because he's alternating between like states of like he can remember things for a second, and then all of a sudden he can't. You know, and it's so great how he just dilates between like total anger and frustration with with his wife who like ran off. He can't remember her coming back, and then all of a sudden it comes back to him, and he's like, "Oh, that's right."
Right.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
it's phenomenal.
It's really great. But
Yes.
Huey, he has to put down his dad, and then I think he goes back to work too quick is part of what that storyline is about.
Yes. Yes.
And
Because his first mission back is this undercover operation at Tech Knight's banner, and it's so dark, it's stressful and depressing. Oh
Yeah.
God.
he goes in too deep, and there is a criticism of this episode from a lot of people. That you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah. Some stuff online that I saw was like that it turned this stuff about sexual assault and violence into a joke. And I don't necessarily agree with that criticism. I think this episode it's a good blend of subterfuge, realism, and emotional growth. But yeah, it is, I think, ultimately really focused on how Huey's he's not dealing with the loss of his dad in a very healthy way. He's just jumping right back into work, getting in and over his head, and it's very heavy in this moment here.
Yeah, and I think I can understand where the criticism comes from, because what Ashley and Tech Knight are doing is over the top and weird in a lot of ways, and it's it's gross. But I think when it comes to Huey specifically, his trauma is not treated as a joke at all. I didn't get that at all. For what I got was that he wasn't dealing with the loss of his father and jumped into a mission that he wasn't prepared for, just as a way to not think about it. And then that caused him to be even more traumatized. And then that's why, at the end of the episode, he's like, I miss my dad. I'm not okay. I didn't feel like this was a fucking joke at all, really. So,
yeah, I agree. But I also say that, Tech Knight, the depiction of this character, is honestly a far more accurate representation of how a Batman-type character would be in real life.
How a billionaire heir guy would be. And it's playing off of the classic internet joke about, why does Batman have so many underage boys living in his house? That's the whole joke of this.
Yes, yes.
Leave Batman alone, but you can have this weird version of him as well. And it seems like both Noir and Tech Knight are kind of Batman. Oh god, and Tech Knight is so evil in this season. I didn't realize how much of a piece of shit he was. But remember, he's talking to A-Train and Sage about oh yeah, this wealth came from when my ancestors were slave catchers. And and it's oh my god, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah, and he's kind of proud about it, and he's like, oh yeah, my granddaddy would have caught you, A-Train. It's oh my god.
Oh yeah.
Oh. And then we learn that he's secretly having this deal with Homelander of setting up basically internment camps for all the Starlighters and other people. He's
under the prison. Oh yeah, and he manages private prisons. That's where his wealth comes, which is the modern extension of the slave catching industry, because we've talked about this before, but modern police departments originated after the Civil War as a means of getting as many black people into prison as possible, because there was a loophole that made it so you could still use slave labor so long as the person was incarcerated. This is documented. You can look it up. It's explicitly true. So, yeah, the prison industrial complex is specifically about imprisoning as many black people and making them do slave labor as possible, which is fucked up. And Tech Knight is fucked up, and I'm glad he died. Good for them for killing him.
I'm glad that Alfred character killed him. And I like that at the end of the episode, it was oh, and the safe word, it was Zendaya. It was what the what? Just comes out of nowhere. I love that.
Also, the Spider-Man parallel web weaver was so fucking disgusting. They really find a way to make superpowers real nasty in this show a lot of the time.
Yeah, they really do. And we've always seen that Spider-Man character depicted as this cool, fun little teenager character who's learning about the world, and then Webweaver's a junkie, which is this disgusting kind of
and his web hole is I don't want.
Yeah, but we don't have to talk about it. It's weird. But moving on with Huey, because he's put through the ringer this season, and then finally he's kind of tricked by the shapeshifter, into betraying Annie in this regard, and even with all the chaos and everything going on, all the trauma he's endured, he kind of learns his lesson in a way, especially from his dad, just like mercy is brave. Like being merciful is a brave act.
Yeah.
And I think that was very powerful. And then he tries to find this diplomatic solution with Newman, and it almost fucking works.
Yep. No, you're totally right. A lot of people I saw criticizing Huey's arc this season about how the writers were just putting him through trauma for trauma's sake, and it's like, I don't know. I think you hit the nail on the head. He's put through all of this trauma so that he realizes the truth in what his dad was trying to teach him, and he looks for a better way. Because, like Newman said, it's like it's war games. The only way to win is not to play. And like I think there is a point where you just have to fight the evil people who are in power and control everything. But like I enjoyed the element of him where he's like, I used to freak out when I saw blood, and now I don't even think about it.
Yeah, he's so used to it. He's cool, calm, and collected in crisis situations now, but he's realized that it's like this violence is only going to continue to beget violence, and it's just it's a cycle, and we just need to find a way out that's more peaceful and merciful.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Frenchie and Kimiko for a little bit as well. Always.
Frenchie and Kimiko, great characters.
What a delightful relationship.
Yeah, Frenchie's still got some great one-liners in this season. He's always kind of this good point of comedic relief, like when they're on the farm. He's like, "That man cannot have sex with that sheep. It's eat. The sheep are gonna eat the guy. That's how they're gonna ingest it." Like, he's got some great little comedic bits, you know. But it's tough watching him this season grapple with these past crimes because he's exploring this relationship with this guy, but he's realizing, oh, I killed his family. You know?
Yeah. And he knew that the whole time, and he recruited Colin to the Starlight House initially, which is like, and it's this interesting character trait where he always like finds people who he has done harm to and is trying to like mend the wound without taking accountability for the actual harm that he caused, which is a very interesting trait. And then he comes clean, and it destroys the relationship, obviously. But you know, I thought he had a really interesting arc, and I saw the criticism from like the usual suspects, right? It's like, oh my god, they made Frenchie gay. The show's too woke now, and it's like Frenchie's always been bi, man. He's in like a throuple with that other girl and the guy. Because that's why he misses protecting Mallory's. That's why he like stops tailing Lamplighter, which gets Mallory's grandkids killed. Because his like boyfriend in the throuple was dying of a drug overdose. We knew that. Like, oh my god, guys, pay attention to the fucking show.
Just the usual suspects getting angry and.
Yeah,
I think I saw some of those comments online about like, oh, they're building up Frenchie and Kimiko for so long, and now they're taking it a different direction. They're not going to be together. It's like, okay, let the season finish, and then you'll see where it's going. Like,
yeah, you saw that a lot with the discourse on the Star Wars Acolyte show, which we'll talk about in a couple episodes. But it's like people making critiques of the season before the season is done, and it's like, hey, maybe recognize that you're like a third of the way through a story. Let it finish. Let it complete. Maybe your complaints will be addressed by the end. And in a lot of cases for that show and this one, they fucking were. Oh my god. Look what happens when you sit back and let the story tell itself to you.
Don't just jump on the throat immediately. Yeah, give them some time. And yeah, I was so happy with like in the finale. Well, first, I was happy in the finale when we got that. It's kind of a very beautiful shot of Kimiko and Frenchie finally understanding their relationship, and they kiss each other.
So cute.
And then it slowly kind of pans out. They're on this catwalk. It's just it's a very beautiful shot, in my opinion. I think it's very well framed and everything. So it's very emotionally gratifying. And then once the episode finishes and they're separated, and Kimiko's first line in the entire show is her screaming no as they're separated. That is just
so
devastating.
Sad.
So I'm now that she's more vocal, I'm curious to see if that continues. Like if she's gonna speak more in season 5 as things go along, or if she's gonna kind of continue to stay the course or something like that. But still love Frenchie and Kimiko. They're such a solid part of the boys.
Yeah, me too. I kind of hope she stays partially nonverbal because her communicating with the text messages is such a part of her character, but I bet she will be speaking more and maybe like more and more over the run of the final season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that ending of the episode where they're all going their separate ways because shit's fucked and they're trying to escape and they all get captured by different people, which is one of the connections to Gen V, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Yeah.
But there were some like little bits of the season that.
Well, I mean, there's so many things in this season that I love. There, like I said earlier, this season, like so many others, is just rich in quick, small, fast jokes, or just small little references, or just other things like that you can be like, oh my gosh, that's so funny that they included that. Like the Mortal Kombat-esque, like Street Fighter type of video game with the superheroes fighting, kind of Injustice style. It's like, oh, this is so funny just to see Ryan playing as like Lamplighter and doing that, or like the canceling of the A-Train movie for a tax write-off.
Yep.
what
great industry joke there.
What a great stab there at the what was that, WB?
Yeah, Warner Brothers
and everything. Yeah, canceling the Batgirl movie, which is just as a tax write-off. That's so funny. Or the Sesame Street rip-off, like all these puppets that look like Homelander and A-Train talking, and they're like, oh, what's got you down? Antifa.
Yeah, that's another. On a similar vein, it's been interesting to watch the Vought company go from performative like rainbow capitalism in season 1 to now just being an explicitly right-wing propaganda machine. Like they've always had the Tucker Carlson stand-in on their Fox News parody, which I wonder if them killing off Cameron Coleman was a reference to Tucker Carlson getting fired from Fox News.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. But like they're an explicitly like fascist organization now, just like spewing right-wing propaganda constantly. But I also love the ice skating play was about the same thing. Remember, it was like it was a war on Christmas play basically. But my god, it was so funny because
we can't say Merry Christmas anymore. It has to be Happy Holidays.
It's like it's just not true. People say Merry Christmas all the time, but it got. I was not expecting it to go the way it did, where like Huey is there trying to like catch Newman saying something or other, and then Homelander realizes it and tries to shoot Huey, but they shine a light at him, so he looks away and lasers through the...
he lasers through the Maeve skater, and then chaos ensues down there.
Like someone else skates over someone's hand or something.
Like multiple people are down. Oh, it's so bad. But
it's
that was so
fucking funny.
So great. And I love all the like the conspiracy shit, like from Firecracker, like when she's like live streaming them, like, we just found a Jewish cabal like orgy at the conspiracy convention, shit, and it's like, what the fuck? And she's like mainstreaming the pedo shit, like, but she herself is a pedo, which we already talked about. Or Noir, like, I also really loved how like Noir is just, we already kind of talked about it too, but him just being told to shut the fuck up all the time. Like, every time he's like got a question, just Homelander can hear him and he just says, shut the fuck up, Noir, from far away. And it's like, oh, that's not going to go great. And, Huey's dad being able to control his powers, I thought was very clever. Like, he just phases into that one room where the guy's like literally trying to ask out the nurse, and he just kills that guy. Like, what the fuck? I'm in the middle of this dude now. And
it's so sad.
And I really liked all the V'd up animals on the farm too. Just it was like, is that a V'd up fucking bull? Like the flying sheep and everything. I thought that was so funny. And then they have that the Vought Entertainment Convention or whatever it is. I don't even remember what they called it.
Well, it's a parody of like the Marvel presentation. It's like this show just finished reshooting its reshoots. It's the most expensive show ever made. Gotta be good, right?
Or like there's like a great joke in there where they're like, now we're personalizing the content to the demographics of our viewers. So if you're watching this deep show, if you're a black viewer, we're going to swap out this image for a bottle of cognac,
that's right.
on the nose racist bullshit.
Yeah.
Or like you're right about like the Marvel kind of parody of like, we're announcing 19 new phases today of movies.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, what the
And
fuck?
they call it the VCU too, the Vought Cinematic Universe, and they've done that.
Right.
And if you remember in previous seasons when they go to like the movie premieres, the Vought Studios logo is the Marvel Studios logo.
That's right. Oh my gosh. So many small little on the nose jokes. Like even like the responsibility PSA of just like, I take responsibility for racism.
For racism.
It's like, it is so on the nose of like these like tone deaf celebrity PSA campaigns that are like trying to end racism or end these things. It's like it's more than that. It's not just an awareness campaign.
Yeah. Well, and I forget what season it was, but they make fun of that fucking Gal Gadot's Imagine video from the start of COVID.
Oh,
Remember when
yeah.
she did that and she got all the celebrities to sing Imagine by John Lennon in their houses together? And it was like,
So cringe. So of its
Yes.
time.
But I want to touch on some connections to Gen V, obviously, because it's the spin-off show about the superhero college and all that. Like, I watched it, and so I obviously recognize all of the characters when they appeared here, as well as, like, the introduction of the soup virus. And I thought all of that worked pretty well. I felt they were all built up organically enough within this season to where their role is understandable, but they also played minor enough roles where it wasn't like confusing or distracting. But you didn't finish Gen V from what I remember. How did you feel the same way, having not seen the show yet, or were you more
I mean, it was fine to see them included. And I wasn't terribly confused because I've only seen the one episode, so I need to finish it, go back, probably get a refresh, and just finish the season. But like, so I recognized like one or two characters, like the girl who like whispers in people's ears.
Yeah.
Like, I recognized her, but I didn't recognize the other guy really. So I wasn't terribly confused. So yeah, I was happy to see them, and I think that they'll work well. There's a part of me that's like, is conflicted about this crossover between the characters in the two shows, just because I think that Gen V, it's a really cool concept, feels very fresh, feels very original, and it's a way to explore another side of the boys universe without bleeding too much over into the other series. And I don't really want to see the boys universe turn into like a Marvel or a Star Wars where you have to watch all the content to get all the context because these characters are going to cross over between the shows and I'm not going to understand who these characters are. But at the same time, there's only 2 shows right now. It's not 1 billion. And once the boys finishes, I honestly can't imagine that Gen V will continue for much longer after that. So I'm fine. I really can't. I can't imagine what they would do once that show finishes, unless they can create their own or strong enough kind of identity without relying too much on the original.
Yep, I agree. I don't want to see this become an MCU style thing. I don't think this warrants that, and that is actually one of my concerns about the franchise is if Amazon wants to keep the boys brand going after season 5 ends, I am worried it will compromise the potential like satisfying finale of season 5 and this show. Like what does that mean for what type of victory or status will the world of the boys be in after this show, and will that be satisfying for this show if they want to continue with other franchises in the universe afterward?
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, totally.
Hopefully the boys itself gets a very satisfying finale. I know we are getting season 2 of Gen V between now and season 5. So that's why season 5 is coming out in 2026. Gen V season 2 is 2025.
Oh man. I didn't realize that was so many years.
I know.
I want more. Please give me more.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of season 5, do you have any predictions on what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so a couple. I'll go first because yours are a little bit more detailed than mine. But I think Billy Butcher will die by the end. I think that's a fair prediction. I think A-Train will make a return and sacrifice himself in like a hero, like a go out in a blaze of glory, full hero. I don't think we'll see Queen Maeve again. I think her story wrapped up perfectly fine last season, and she's off with her girlfriend. I think, and I kind of hope. So I'm curious what direction they'll take Butcher in. Is he going to be a full-on villain in season 5, or is he going to be kind of the way he is and have a pseudo redemption by the end of the show? And if that's the direction they go in, I think Annie and Butcher are going to have to team up to rescue everybody else because they're the only two who are free now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be really compelling because they fucking hate each other. So having them be the ones who have to team up to rescue the rest of the boys would be really satisfying. I think we're also going to get a big showdown between Homelander and Butcher. Homelander is either going to die or lose his powers in this, and Butcher will die as well, but like gets to say goodbye to Ryan, who I think ultimately part of the mission of the end of the show should be like save Ryan's soul, like prevent him from going down this path, and I think they'll succeed at that. And I think Annie and Huey will make it through and end up together. Those are my
Fingers
predictions. What about you?
Yeah, I think we share a few of the same ones. Like, I think that there's going to be some kind of climactic showdown between Butcher and Homelander, in which they both die. But I have also spent a little time on Reddit and other places just digging into some theories, and there's a lot of good theories out there, and I like a lot of them. So I'm going to outline just a few that I really like that I discovered from reading. So I'm not taking credit for really any of these. But I saw a theory online. One that I thought was neat was that Huey would be the one to convince Ryan to kill Homelander because Huey had to kill his dad this season. So I think that there's kind of an interesting parallel there. But I also, I'm really hoping that Ryan converts to the boys team because, I agree. He represents hope for the future. He is like the next generation of superheroes, and he's shown signs of goodness in the past seasons and in this season too, where he's like,
well, he's like hope for the future, right? He's like what Carl was in Walking Dead until he wasn't.
Exactly. Like, he is kind of the future, and we did see him kind of stand up and say, I want to actually help people. You know, he told Homelander that. So I think that he believes that and he wants to go with that. And you already touched on this a little bit, but I saw another theory online that Homelander doesn't die by the end, but instead he loses his powers and becomes a nobody, which would be vindicating because it's like, okay, now you have to actually live everyday life like a regular person, and you no longer can be a ruthless asshole. You have to actually integrate yourself with society, which I thought would be really cool, and I'd love to see that.
That's what I've wanted for like a year. That's what my Homelander video is about. I'll link it in the description for anyone who wants to watch it.
Yeah, and I think that is the appropriate ending for the show in a way, rather than Homelander dying. He just loses his powers, and it would be more appropriate, same way as when, a dictator loses their powers, or someone who's like a fascist loses their political powers. Like, they can't do anything anymore. I've also seen, since we got a mid-credit scene or post-credit scene of Homelander realizing that Soldier Boy's still alive and all this stuff, Soldier Boy's going to come back. So I saw another theory online that Soldier Boy and Ryan would kind of team up because they're not really aligned with either side right now, in a way, because Butcher kind of betrayed Soldier Boy, and Homelander probably doesn't. I don't know, but I could see that happening, the two of them teaming up in a way. I also saw a theory online that Homelander may go crazy eventually and kind of mirror the comics in a way where he'll go and kill the president, and eventually just organize an official coup that way. And his nature as a genocidal psychopath will just become well known among everybody. So I could see that happening too. I could also see Sage betraying Homelander at a certain point, or perhaps she has some kind of bigger plan for herself that she's been focused on the whole time. Like one of those theories pointed out their initial conversation. They talked about, she was like, or Homelander said like Caesar, basically, and she was like, just like Caesar, and we all know what happened to Caesar, right? He got backstabbed by everybody. So I think that's gonna happen, or at least something like that. I also saw another theory online that Homelander would sacrifice Noir to Soldier Boy because Soldier Boy doesn't know that it's a new Noir. He may think it's the old Noir, and it could be some kind of peace offering in a way, which I think could be interesting. But I do think that the next season, the way it'll start, the boys, Huey, Kamiko, Frenchie, Mother Milk, I think that they're going to be in some kind of internment camp when we see them
Yeah.
again, or at least incarcerated to some degree. Will it be an internment camp? We'll see. But one thing that I did want to mention, it was a quote, just to kind of close out my thoughts on this season, from the show's producer Eric Kripke. He, in a Hollywood Reporter interview, it's just a direct quote here. It's a story about the intersection of celebrity and authoritarianism and how social media and entertainment are used to sell fascism. And I think that's a pretty accurate summary of what this show is all about.
Yes.
And I think that's going to continue into the next season.
Yes. Actually, I thought of one more prediction while you were talking.
Oh, yeah.
And I think because this is something I would like. I would like Ryan to not kill any of the bad guys. I think the mission should be to protect Ryan and keep his hands as clean as possible because he's the hope for the future, right? And I think maybe that is how Sage's genius is defeated. She accounts for everything except some like radical act of kindness or selflessness because she can't conceive of that, and then that's how the boys somehow win. I don't know how it will work specifically in this structure, but I could see like there's something else like this, right? Where it's like the villain is so smart and calculates everything, but they don't account for like just human kindness in a way or empathy, and that's
power
how
of
they're
friendship.
undone. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think that would be really interesting if that's how the coup is undone. Is
I like that.
through what Huey was trying to do this time. Like,
Yeah.
the only way to win is not to play, and Sage and Homelander don't account for that. But we'll see what happens in season 5 in 2 years.
I want it now.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, or you want to talk about other stuff?
Now let's move on to other stuff.
All right.
It's our last segment of the show where we talk about things we've been up to, other media we've been consuming, watching, reading, exploring. Dylan, what have you been up to lately?
All right, so things I've been carrying on with, Cryptonomicon, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree, House of the Dragon, and the Acolyte. Going to save thoughts on the Acolyte and House of the Dragon because we'll be talking about those in upcoming episodes. But Cryptonomicon is pretty good. I'm in the final couple hundred pages now. And Shadow of the Erd Tree is, of course, brilliant. I've talked about it before, but it's... God, the exploration of this DLC's world is so interesting, and the boss fights are awesome. It's just it's a great fucking game.
Cool.
Also, I saw for the first time Twister from the 90s with Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Super fun movie, just a great, blockbuster thrill ride thing. I'd really recommend it. And I watched Twister in part because I also went to go see Twisters last week. Also a fantastic and fun ride. Full theater in my screening. Everybody was having a great time. I'd honestly really recommend both of them. And then I also saw something that you also saw. Long Legs.
Legs.
Yeah, I like Long Legs a lot. I liked the first half more than I liked the second half, but I thought it was really well shot, great atmosphere, great acting, cool movie. But yeah, with that, I'll pass it off to you. What have you been watching?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just pick up with Long Legs there. Yeah, we went and saw Long Legs at the Mayan Theater here in Denver, which is an awesome venue. If you're ever in Denver and you're looking for a cool theater to go check out movies at, go check out the Mayan. It's really neat. It's one of those landmark theaters. Long Legs, I liked it. It's... I think what I liked the most about it was the visuals and just the general atmosphere and vibes of the movie. Yeah. And I think that part I really liked. It's very spooky and eerie. The plot itself, I think it could have been better than what it was. Like, I think it's been marketed very heavily as like this, our generation's version of the Silence of the Lambs. And it's kind of like Silence of the Lambs, but it's like,
until it isn't.
Yeah, until it isn't. It's very. It's not. It's not like Silence of the Lambs. It's kind of its own thing, and I think it was a good movie. But yeah, I think it could have been a little better in some ways, and explain some things a little more clearly. But it was still really cool. And the guy didn't have very long legs, but I think it was more. I don't want to spoil too much about it, but so that's all I'll say on it for now. But Also been watching The Acolyte, finished that. Yeah, I'll save my thoughts on that for our episode on it in 2 weeks' time.
Yep.
And just last night, I watched Poor Things for the first time because I really wanted to. After us watching Kinds of Kindness the other weekend, which I really enjoyed, wanted to check out Poor Things, just continue on with this director's work, and it's honestly a fun movie. I really did like it, and the messages behind it of just like self-improvement and exploration, I really vibed with.
Experiencing
really,
life, I think.
yes, experiencing life and just finding ways to just make life better for yourself and others. Like I think that was really, really cool, and it went in directions that I wasn't expecting it to go. Just the way she navigated the world was interesting. And I don't remember if I've mentioned it before on our previous episodes, but I've been playing Animal Well on the Nintendo Switch. It's a game from, I think it's called Big Mode.
Big Mode.
Developers. It's I follow Video Game Donkey online, and that's his studio. So it's like their first game that they put out.
Publisher, yeah.
Publisher, yes, thank you, Publisher. And I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. It's just kind of a simple side scroller, but it's very challenging, and it makes you think outside the box and interact with a lot of different kinds of animals in a well.
Yeah,
but it's fun. I would recommend that game. It's a good time.
And just so we're giving full credit to, I looked it up, the publisher is Big Mode, which is Donkey's thing.
Thank you.
And then the developer is called Shared Memory. Just
Shared
so
Memory.
We give them a little bit of the spotlight too.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. But on a sad note, since you mentioned the Mayan Theater where we saw Longlegs, wonderful, cool theater, but I was over by the Landmark Esquire this afternoon, and it is officially closed now. We knew it was closing this month, but I walked by and it's gone. After 96 years, it's closed its doors, which is really devastating. It was a great little theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, saw a lot of fun movies there.
I think that's just going to happen with a lot of smaller movie theaters over the years. Looking ahead, just the way that box offices are performing lately, I think that could just be a general trend that we'll see more and more lately. But
I don't know if I mentioned it in our last episode. It may have been in between, but I saw The Bike Riders as well.
Oh, cool.
With Austin Butler, Jodie Comer, and Tom Hardy. Really great. I like it a lot. I would recommend it to most everyone. But yeah, I think that's it from us, right?
Yeah.
So
thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. We really appreciate it. Please like and follow, or like this video, or like this podcast, and follow us online. It helps us grow organically that way.
Yep. And just a reminder, we will be back next week for Deadpool and Wolverine, and the following week for The Acolyte. And then we'll be back to our normal 2-week cadence after that. But yeah, like and subscribe wherever we are. Niles, where can people find you online?
On Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. Dylan, what about you? Where can people follow you online?
On Instagram at DylanD1026. On Twitter at D-Day Movies. On YouTube at D-Day Movies. On Twitch at D-Day_movies. And you can find both of us here at Play Pause Rewind and Play Pause Rewind videos on YouTube and your podcast platform of choice. We're also on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. So just follow us along. All that's linked in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.
Bye.